Oh, thank you for coming. Fantastic. Right, last but one session. So what we're going to talk about today is a progress update on what we've been doing recently with Stratos. We are going to then look ahead, talk about some of the future stuff we're working on. Richard is going to give a demo to kind of showcase some of the features we've added fairly recently, and then there'll be a tiny bit of wrap up at the end. And we'll try and leave 5 minutes or so for questions. So we came out of incubation. So there wasn't much fuss around this or any announcements, but we are now graduating from an incubated project to a core Cloud Foundry project. So we will be moving GitHub organizations. It should be transparent. GitHub will redirect. Over time, we'll make some updates to our references, but we'll keep you posted in the Slack channel. So that's an awesome achievement for the team. So we're super pleased to be doing this. I found this morning. Some company, Source E2E, posted this yesterday. They've done an analysis of the Cloud Foundry projects, and Stratos is the most active repository. So I just want to make a point. We do still actively develop and maintain Stratos. There's a core team at SUSE who do that. We have others that contribute PRs and features as well. And they said some quite nice things as well. Go take a look. In terms of what we've done recently, core Stratos is kind of the core, so independent of any particular feature. There's a few things we've done. We second point. We continually try and refine the user experience and usability across the board. So if we get features in and we get feedback, or we ourselves say, hey, this is not providing the best experience, we'll try and refine and tweak those. Things particularly we've done around the navigation. So we had quite a bit of horizontal nav in some of the areas. That's now been moved down the side, I think, which is nicer. I'll skip some of that. Or there's some improvements in terms of being able to focus and tab around the UI if you're using a keyboard. We've got this sort of new home screen if you've not seen it. So, with Stratos, you can register and connect multiple Cloud Foundries or foundations. You can end up with quite a lot of orgs and spaces and apps. And so when you go in, if you wanted to look at a particular app, you kind of have to work your way down and find it to find out what's going on. So with this, you can now favorite all of those entities. So you can favorite a Cloud Foundry or an app or an org or a space. I don't know if you can do a service, but we're going to add that. And then if you write extensions on top of Stratos, you can then also favorite entities in those as well. So this means when you come in, as shown here, and Richard will demo this, you can kind of get to the apps that you maybe care about. And then as you jam around, you get your activity on the right as well. So you can go back easily to where you've been. In terms of some of the app stuff, again, I've thrown this one up there. We've tried to make things a bit more visual across the UI. So, for example, when you're deploying an app, you just get a more visual tile experience. We've used it other places. We do things like autocomplete names as you type now, just things to make it just that little bit easier. And in terms of sort of user management, you can now invite users into Stratos. So if you're an admin and it's configured, you can go into an org or a space. You can say invite user. You can enter their email address. It will send an email to them. You can change the template. But once you've done that, before they've even kind of clicked through and come in, you can continue, that user's created, you can continue to set them up, give them access to the orgs and spaces that you want them to access. They'll get the email, they click through, set a password, and they're good to go straight away. So that's now in there. That's something the cloud.gov guys requested. A few things on services. Again, I think Richard will show this. So we've now got support for the user-provided service instances. So those are shown together on the service wall, which is quite nice. You can browse service plans in the details page. If a service has a JSON schema, we show a much nicer UI now when you bind that service. So instead of just getting the ability to enter a JSON blob, you'll get more of a form field based on the JSON schema for that service. That's something our friends at Orange did, which is quite nice. And then a few other bits and bobs. I guess one of the other main features we've added is Autoscaler. So again, this was a contribution from the IBM team. So they've obviously recently revamped the Autoscaler service. They previously had a UI for Autoscaler. What they've done is they've kind of written a new UI, and they've written that inside of Stratos. So we have an extensions mechanism. They've used that to add support for Autoscaler into Stratos. And again, Richard will show this, but it lets you, for an app, view the policy, create the policy, edit the policy, and then view events so you can see, okay, why did Autoscaler increase the number of instances up or down? So it's quite nice. And we've also more recently added support for quotas. So previously in Stratos, you could see a quota, but you couldn't actually edit or create. So now you can go into an org or a space, you can edit the quota, you can create a new one, you can assign a quota to a space or an org. So that's quite nice. What's next? So I talked about extensions, I think, there as I went along. Point I kind of make is Stratos is kind of already extensible. We have, I won't go into the detail, but we have various places throughout the code where you can add in your own extensions. So you can create custom themes, for example, which is something we at SUSE do. You can change the colors. You can change all the logos. There's things that a lot of companies actually do, right? And often they don't go any further than that. They just take the core Stratos, tweak the colors, and add their logo in the place. So that's something we support. You could change the login screen if you wish, if you want it to look more different than the standard one. And again, that's something we at SUSE do. So it adheres to our corporate standard. You can add in custom UI views. So we have certain points in the UI where you can add in a new view. So we use Angular for the front end. With Angular decorators, you can effectively just take an Angular component, add a decorator, say where you want this to appear, and then that will get inserted into the right place in the UI. So for example, in the application wall, maybe we'll show this, you can add buttons into the action bar at the top. You can, on the application view, you can add into the side nav. And generally, most of the places that you care about, you can add in your own nav items linked into the right place. And you can add stuff on the back end as well. So that uses Golang. We have sort of a generic proxying mechanism when you're talking to a REST server or REST API. If that doesn't meet your needs for whatever you're trying to do, then you can extend the back end with your own APIs. Yeah. You cannot remove buttons. So that's a good question, though. So there is a feature request where there are some features we have in the UI that not everybody wants. So we do things like you can SSH into an application instance, and you can deploy applications from the UI. And those two features are ones that, maybe it was you, I don't know. Somebody in the past has said, hey, I don't want those for my org, right? My company doesn't really want to let people do them. Of course, you can do those via the command line. But in the UI, they were like, well, I'd rather not have those. So when I come on to talk about extensions now, those are the kind of things that if we factor out into separate extensions, then when somebody comes to build their Stratos, they could choose not to include those. So that'd be a way of disabling those. I think more generically, we will try and look at a way over time where you can turn certain features on and off. An administrator could do that. But we don't have that right now. Excuse me. So our current approach that we have for extensions is very much kind of catered for somebody that wants to take Stratos, add some extra bits in, maybe change the theme a little bit, right? So the way you do that is you fork the repo, you put your changes in a particular place, and then we minimize any conflicts when you come to kind of rebase. I mean, that's okay, but we want to make it easier for people to share extensions, right? If they do that, then it's in their repo. Yes, somebody else could come along, take that custom code out, maybe put it in their version, make it work. What we want to be able to do is to support users that they want to build a version of Stratos, they want to take some extensions from other people that have made them available, and of course we want people who want to create extensions to better do that on their own and to make them available to others to use. And we want people to be able to build those extensions kind of independently of the core team. So kind of want to get to this kind of world where there's a bunch of core Stratos pieces as separate packages. There's a bunch of extensions, some may be developed by the core team. Some developed maybe by the IBM team, for example, the Autoscaler. Some maybe the SUSE ones that we've talked about here that have nothing to do with Cloud Foundry. And then maybe a bunch of custom themes, right? And we want some of those to live in different repos. So the core Stratos team will take care of things like the Stratos packages and maybe the Cloud Foundry, but maybe the IBM Autoscaler lives in a separate repo, right? And maybe the SUSE ones live in another repo, and your extension lives in your own repo, which means that you as a developer of an extension, there's a clear ownership for the code. You can release it at your own cadence. You don't have to worry about kind of liaising with the Stratos team to get a PR merged into our repository. So that's where we're trying to get to, The front-end extensions, because we use Angular, those will be Angular libraries published as npm packages. On the back end, those will be Go modules. We're trying to leverage standard practices as much as possible for those. There's a little bit of custom stuff we need to do with theming. And we're going to have a little bit of metadata so that you can declare dependencies between the back-end and the front-end components, right? So if you're including a front-end component and it needs a back-end piece, then or extension, then we'll make sure that you can describe that metadata. And we're working to currently kind of rejig things so that we can enable this. That's the bulk of the work we're doing at the moment. Okay, so another thing we're going to be working on, we haven't started yet, hopefully, where are we? September, November of this year, is really on V3. So Richard's been doing a lot of work to kind of capture our requirements for V3. So we're working with that team. We have quite different sort of use cases to things like the CLI, right? Because with Stratos, you can have multiple foundations registered. It's, you can jam around and browse between org spaces apps very quickly. So the API needs to let us do that efficiently, right? With the CLI, you tend to target an org. If it takes a couple of seconds to come back, you don't really perceive much of a problem in the CLI, right? You then target a space, you then push your app, or you ask about your app. You can kind of live with a little bit of making a request per one of those. But when we're browsing and you want to switch to an app wall, in and out of an app, we need really efficient calls that let us get as much of the information as possible in the most efficient manner. So we are working with the V3 API team to try and make sure that our needs are met. We're going to start implementing, as I said, in November. And what we're really trying to work out is how we continue to support both V2 and V3. So our current plan, once we've got extensions in place, is that we'll take the V2 kind of version of the Cloud Foundry, which will become an extension to Stratos. We'll then clone that to make a V3 version. We'll leave the V2 one alone. We'll do fixes if there are security fixes or kind of major bugs to fix. And then we'll work on the V3, migrating that to the API and taking care of the new kind of features that are part of the V3 API. So it will kind of look like this. It won't. But if you've got like cards on we have the app wall, hopefully you're familiar with that, where you see your applications. We'll make an update so that will both show V2 and V3 apps. So let's say you had a Cloud Foundry that was using the V2 API, you had a newer Cloud Foundry that was V3. You would see those applications side by side. If you clicked on a V2, you would go to a route like this. And inside of Angular, it's very good. It will route that and use the components for that V2. So that would be the V2 extension. If you clicked on the other one, it would take you to the V3 extension. And you would use the Angular V3 code. And the nice thing with the way Angular works is it would only load the code for these if you actually invoked it. So if you never used a V2 app, that V3 code would never get loaded into the browser. So it's quite nice. Araignee support, so there's not too much we have to do for this, but we want to make sure that if you're using Cloud Foundry with Araignee, that we do the right thing. We have some integration with the metrics, so whether you're using the metrics chart that we have or Bosch Prometheus metrics, there's currently a way in Stratos where you can wire in metrics, and we then show you, for example, which cell an application instance is running on. We want to make sure we can do the same kind of thing for Araignee, so you can see which Kubernetes node your application instance is running on, and then if there's a problem with that application, you maybe spot that there's a problem with a particular node. And then sort of more generally, we continue to update the stack that we use for for Stratos, so Angular on the front end, I said go on the back end, keeping track of those, particularly on the front end. Angular revs every sort of 6 months for a major version. The next one, version 9, is quite a major rewrite in terms of finally supporting the IV renderer. This should kind of bring us much better performance improvements, particularly around compilation. So we do have some issues if you CF push Stratos without pre-building it. It just takes a long time to compile, and this will help with that a lot. And it also finally provides APIs so that we can do localization. Then I guess more generally, with project improvements is the way we run things. We're trying to get towards monthly releases. We're kind of, does that work out half by way? I don't know. Every 2 months at the moment. So we want to get better at doing that and do that more regularly. Also improve the visibility of what we're working on so that people can see what's coming in the next version, representing some of the major features as epics, and we'll represent those as projects in GitHub so you can see what work is left to do before a particular feature makes it in. And then we'll reopen doing the regular project meetings. Okay, so that was a quick whiz through. And then I'm going to hand over to Richard, who will demo you some of those things, hopefully. And then we'll come back and just wrap up.
Thank you. Okay, let me just start from the start. So I'll take you through some of the features, yes, as Neil said, that we've recently added in the last 6 to 12 months. So the first thing you may notice in a lot of talks we've had this conference, we've been showing the downstream version, and this is the upstream version with a generic blue background and the Cloud Foundry Stratos logo. I'm now going to awkwardly type in the password. And one of the things we previously, around about 12 months ago, when you logged in, you'd get taken straight to the application wall where you can see all your apps. And that might be a bit of a slow process because we might be fetching a lot of apps. So we've kind of optimized it now and have this new home screen. I'm going to log in and retype the password. And you're straight into the home screen. And in the home screen, as Neil mentioned, you can see entities that you've favorited. You've gone through the app and favorited. And the reason why we did this is because sometimes the organizations and spaces were quite a few clicks down into the interface. And you might not be able to quickly get to where you want to go to. So now you can favorite these. And then when you click on them, you can get taken straight down to the parts where you're interested in. And you can see the summary for these entities. At the moment, you can favorite applications, organizations, and spaces. So I'm going to click around on a few of these just to show where you can kind of quickly get into. You can also search in here as well. So if you have 100 here, then you can easily kind of find the ones you wanted. That was a bad example. Or you can filter the types as well. So I'm going to continue clicking around on these a little bit more. And then show the second part of the home screen, which is basically the activity side. And you can see that we have a list at the top, which is mostly the frequent entities you go to, or the recent ones. And if we go to one of these, you can also access the recent count on the top right from wherever you are in the interface. And I'll be using that a little bit later. So let's move on to the application wall. So the app wall is where you see all the applications of all the Cloud Foundries you've connected, and you can do stuff like filtering by those, or searching and sorting. We also support a normal table view as well. And you may have noticed that some of these have colors associated with them, so that some of them are going to be green, saying everything's right, it's deployed, all the instances that you'd expect are up. And for instance, this one's red. So as an operator or a space manager or dev, you may be interested in going and looking at the red ones. And so they're immediately visible. So I'm going to now dip into deploying an application. So in Stratos, you can deploy, you can create a shell of an application, or you can actually provide some source code and do a CF push. And what we've added in the last 6 to 12 months is support for public GitLab, which I'm going to run through now. So I'm going to select a Cloud Foundry organization and space. And then I'm going to provide a project. And one of the things we've done here, is to make it easier to find your repo is to autocomplete. And we're going to choose Quick App. And here we've gone out and fetched the information to do with that repo in the branches. So we're just going to deploy for a master. We're going to select a commit. And then we can supply some overrides. And we're going to create a random route as well. And then we're going to hit deploy. And we're going to pray to the demo gods. And thankfully, we do get the logs. So this is the logs of it as a CF push. We're not going to wait for that to finish. We're just going to go straight to the application summary page. And here you can see some general stats about it, how many instances, where, a little bit from where it's from. I'm not going to go into too much details here because not too much of this has changed. But I'll show you the GitLab page where you can see more specifics about where it came from, the repo, and you can see the list of commits and see that what commit that the application is currently on. So that so you can also do other things with these commits. So say if you it's Friday afternoon, and what do you do on Friday afternoon? You push to production, and then you go down to the pub and celebrate your new features that you've just pushed. But there's a Twitter storm, and there's problems with this new version, so you need to go back to the previous one. So it's quite easy to then go back to so you can log onto your phone while you're in the pub and hit deploy and restore that to a previous version. One of the other big features that has recently been added is the ability to autoscale. So this was all contributed by IBM, our friends at IBM. I'm going to quickly take you through what you do with Autoscaler. So first of all, you set a policy, and then we can see that policy and see what happens with the Autoscaler. So we're going to have some default instant counts. You can add scaling rules. I'm going to add a couple of these. And also, for a policy, you can define schedules to change those instance counts, and you can have them repeating on certain days of the week, or you can set specific time frames. So maybe at Christmas you want to have more instances, or if it's the school holidays you want to have less. So I'm going to just click Finish. That will create the policy. And we could take it to the policy view screen. And here you can see what basically some of the rules you've specified and any schedules that you've added. If this was an old app, you might see scaling events at the bottom. And when the application, or when the autoscaler starts fetching the metrics and receives them, you will start seeing them up here. But we're not going to wait for those. If we did have lots of metrics, we have the charts to show those in an interesting way. So that's it for the app side. I'm going to move on to the marketplace. And the marketplace is where you can see services for all of the Cloud Foundries that you've connected. It's a little bit slow because it's going out to IBM that has quite a few services. Okay, so one of the feedback we had from the community was that the first time you see service plans is when you create a service. So you may want to find a free one first to know that you want to go on and then create an instance. So now you can go into the summary for that service and see a list of service plans. So here we can see there's a lovely free one. So there's Essentials, which is free, so we're going to do that. Also on this page, you can see the list of instances. And here you can see there's one called Delete Me. So what do you see when you see something that says Delete Me? You delete it. And previously, around about a year ago, we had a request from someone from the last summit that basically said it was a little bit too easy to delete important things. And you could just click the affirmative on the dialog, and you've just deleted an org with lots of things in that you don't want to delete. So for some important entities, we've added the ability to basically just type to make you kind of strictly think about what you're doing before you delete it. So we'll delete that one, and then we're going to go and create new Delete Me. So we're going to select the organization space we want to deploy that service to. We're going to select the free one that we've previously found, and then we're going to provide it a name. I'll get it ready for the next demo. So you can also specify the service parameters. And for the service parameters, at the moment, it's JSON. One of our friends at Orange contributed a feature that basically, if the service returned JSON schema for the service parameters, we would use that to populate or dynamically create a form that would have defaults in or kind of guides and place labels that then we could then go on and create the JSON form. I haven't yet got this configured up yet, so it is there. But I would love to demo that, but I can't today. So I'm going to hit Finish, and that hopefully should complete, possibly. And once you've created a service, you go to the service wall. And this is like the marketplace. This is where you see all of the service instances that are associated with all the Cloud Foundries you've collected, you've registered. And you can do the normal kind of filtering. One of the requests we had last year, we didn't have the ability to support user-provided services. And we had quite a lot of community feedback to do that. So now we can create user-provided services as well. And you can do all the usual things like bind, unbind to apps. In fact, no, I'm going to skip that. So one of the big things we had to do was to make this list available to show two types of services, this normal service instance and user-provided service instances. And you can filter on those as usual. And that was it for services. Now moving on to Cloud Foundry. So here we can see we've got the three Cloud Foundries connected. And we're going to dive into an SCF. One of the problems you might have hit, and we've hit, I know I hit a lot, is when you deploy an app and a route's taken, and you just get the message saying this route is already taken. And then you're like, okay, so where is that route? What's going on? What app's it connected to? So what we've done to help with that is a routes page. So this is at a Cloud Foundry level. You can see all the routes associated or in that, and you can easily search or see which applications are attached. and you can do all the things you might expect from that. You can unmap them from all the attached applications or delete those routes entirely. And now let's dive into an organization. And I go into Summit and see the list of spaces. So here we can see that our eyes are immediately taken to this yellow bar. So as an operator, you might think, well, hang on a minute, something's going to go on there. So I'm going to investigate that. And we're going to dive into that space. And in the space summary now, you can see we've got a red warning on the memory usage for this space. And that's basically telling us that we've approaching the quota limit. And before, around about a year ago, that was going to be the end of the story. You'd have to switch to the CLI to start addressing any quota issues. But now we have quota support at the organization and space level. So you can view all of the quotas at those levels. You can create new, edit, and delete. But we're feeling generous today. So we're going to go in and update this quota and give the person some more memory. So we're going to update that. Switch back to the summary, and now as they've got lots more and they're not approaching the limit, there's no red warning. So let's switch back to the organization and the users list. And we had some comments from the team at cloud.gov, and they basically said that one of the problems when you're looking at an organization, that you would see all of the users, regardless of if they had any roles in that organization. So sometimes you don't want to be bombarded with hundreds of people that's not relevant. So now we have a filter that basically says only show me people that have roles at that level. So if you're at space level, you wouldn't see random people from other orgs. And you can also go back and see the ones that have no roles or all. So you can always go and add new people to the ones you want. And I think the final thing I'm going to show today is the ability to invite users. And this is another thing that came from the cloud.gov team. So you can click on it. If you have the right privileges, you can click on invite. And you could enter an email, and this would send, basically, if I'd configured my SMTP server correctly, this would send an email that would have a link in, and then the person could click on that link and set their password. I haven't configured my SMTP server correctly, so when I press the button, it's going to create that user, and then failed because the invite failed. But I'm going to do that now, and we'll get a warning. Hopefully. Possibly. Yeah, I'm having problems with my VPN all the time, and it drops. So I'm gonna whiz over that and pretend that it did actually invite someone. Here's some that I have created earlier. So what would happen then? As soon as you've hit that button, the email would normally be sent. And importantly for the cloud.gov guys, you could start managing roles for that user before the user is accepted or set password. So everything's ready as soon as they log on the first time. So we're just going to apply some random roles. And then they should appear in that list. And that was it for the demo. I'm going to hand back to Neil.
Awesome. So we've only got a couple of minutes. Yeah. Thanks, Richard. If we go back real quick. Yes, we've got a couple of minutes, I think, and then the next person's up. So just to wrap up, right? So what we wanted to do there was show you what we've been working on the last few months, where we're going next. Hopefully you got from this, the focus really is on extensibility, so getting that new extensions framework in place, and then starting to look at the V3 API support. Part of the reason we come to these summits and do these presentations, really, we need your help, right? So if you use Stratos, please let us know. If you don't, please let us know why not, or if that's something you might want to do. If you have suggestions for improvements, then hit us up in the Slack channel or submit GitHub issues. That'd be great. We're going to be launching another Stratos community survey. We do these every year, so there'll be one coming out maybe next week or the week after. Please feed that back to us. Let us know how you deploy Stratos, how you use it. That would be very much appreciated. Awesome. That's the Slack. There's GitHub. Thank you very much.